the BLA. To that we revert. Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Now, I cannot agree with any veiled or clearly voiced reference or utterance that seeks to locate the genesis of our problems with crime and violence in the context of the last 10 years. I don't think it is fair, whether that reference is veiled or clearly voiced, to suggest that those problems started in the last 10 years. And I think that if we are going to summon all hands on board, all hands to the plow, to respond to those problems, we cannot express that desire with one voice, while with the same voice suggesting that those problems started in the last 10 years. So I don't agree with that. And I have heard that type of suggestion expressed in veiled terms, and I've heard that type of suggestion clearly voiced inside this chamber and outside of this chamber. Having said that, Mr. Speaker, clearly this country has lost much in the last 10 years, and part of the experience of the last 10 years has served to exacerbate that problem which predated that period, to which some often refer. So our problems didn't begin, these problems didn't start in the last 10 years, though they may have been exacerbated situation by the happenings of the last 10 years. I believe many in here would agree that our problems are long-standing. This problem is a long-standing one, and the contributing factors are many, going back several years and over successive administrations, those of most recent, that of most recent memory, and even some beyond that. Part of our problems, part of our problem with crime and the manifestation of violence which now exists is to be located or located in the context of or attributed to failures in our education system. We have a very good education system, and Barbadian young people over the years have been exposed, and tremendously so, at the expense of the state, to the privilege of education. And though it's a good system, there are defects in the system, and some of those defects have served to throw up failure, and part of the outflow or outfall from that failure is what we see, the behavior we see manifesting among some of our young people today. We have become a society, Mr. Speaker, which over the years has also adopted negative models. Some of those models have been imported. Some of those models are homegrown and domestically established. But these are models to which the Barbadian Youth Society has been looking now for some time and learning behavioral practices and adopting behavioral dynamics associated with the embodiment of those models. Those models are to be found not only in the area of criminal behavior, they're to be found in the area of entertainment, they're to be found across the spectrum of social life in Barbados. Some of those models are embodied in well-suited personalities, well-clothed personalities, and apparently decent people who every day seem to go to an honest job to work for an honest dollar. But when you drill down, we discover that that is not always the reality, not always the case. And so some of these models have had the privilege of exerting influence over young and impressionable minds who have assumed behavioral practices associated with negative lifestyles. We have, in the last 10 years, seen a worsening of our economic situation, but we've always been faced with constrained economic opportunity. We have at times boasted of unemployment level dropping down to 9%, 7%, and depending upon the gender situation, maybe even 6%. And the truth of the matter is that when you analyze it a bit more closely, those statistics speak of success. There is the reality that youth unemployment in Barbados has been often too high. And that is, in fact, the situation which presently faces us. That is one of the challenges which the Honourable Member from Christchurch, West Central, will have to wrestle with. Youth unemployment, and I suspect that that is why there is this philosophy that those who congregate in certain places ought to be made the targets of such influence as would encourage them to legitimate enterprise. And high levels of youth unemployment will always create a problem for a tendency towards criminal behavior. There's some who believe in a devil. It is said of him, in part, that he finds work for idle hands to do. And therefore, we cannot be faced with the reality over time where you have high levels of unemployment and not anticipate that part of the outflow from that will be the engagement in criminal endeavor if it is perceived that that will bring you some measure of material advancement and economic privilege. Traditionally, and this is definitely not to be associated with the last 10 years, we have had to face the reality beyond unemployment of underemployment, Mr. Speaker, where people in Barbados who are privileged to find work, who are privileged to be able to engage in legitimate endeavor, are faced with the reality that wages are low and in a situation of rising costs. And again, one of the realities made worse in the last 10 years, a situation of rising costs of living, then those who are underemployed and making barely sufficient to eke out a living, and that is not even to make ends meet sufficiently so, will find themselves exposed to the temptations of criminal behavior and sometimes the violence which is also associated with that. We have had for long years now, Mr. Speaker, the erosion of the family architecture in Barbados, and I do not speak from any perspective which suggests that the family which has been seen as the ideal family of husband and wife and children is the only model of family. In fact, Mr. Speaker, I will argue very strenuously, though I support that ideal model, that there is another model of family life and family structure in Barbados which perhaps has even contributed more and more effectively to the development of Barbados as the kind of social arena in which we have enjoyed life, such as of which we have been justly proud. But the architecture, the platform, the structure of family life has been under assault from various quarters and by various threats over time. And to me, frankly, it is largely also in part due to that dynamic, the deterioration at the level of family life in Barbados, that we have to attribute some of what we are seeing now obtaining in Barbados in terms of criminal behavior and the violence that attends it. I support the view of the Honourable Member Sir Thomas. I've espoused it myself. I was happy to hear the Honourable Prime Minister say recently that it's government's intention to invest, and I see it as investment, spend more money on parental education in Barbados. For how long, Mr. Speaker, have we been faced with the phenomenon of children having children in Barbados? And that is not new. That has happened. That has happened from as long as we have been around. But certainly, yes. But certainly, in recent times, it has become more and more a liberal society. More and more, we have had exposed to us the reality that we have parents who are having children. Young mothers sometimes, and having children, as I heard just now said, for big hardback men. But we as a country historically has been the beneficiary of the influence of that extended family structure, the influence of the grandmother, and the influence of a mother who was raised by that type of grandmother mindset. We've lost a lot of that in Barbados, and I'm simply positing the view that if we are going to look to locate the genesis of our problems, and reasonably so, and fairly and honestly so, we have to get beyond the period of the last 10 years and understand that there are issues that we have to address. Children having children in Barbados, the deterioration and breakdown of family life in Barbados. Mr. Speaker, there are serious material gains to be associated with involvement in illicit drug activity in Barbados. We see the evidence all around us of people who have built comfortable lives out of that type of lifestyle. We know that if you can evade the law and successfully pursue that type of lifestyle, you can live large and live comfortably. We do know of those stories where people are cut short because they make missteps, and there comes a day of reckoning for them. We do know where people's privilege with respect to that level of comfort has been short-lived because the long hand of the law inevitably catches up with them. But there's some who make it through and who go through entirely unscathed. And these people, such as they are beneficiaries in this way from that type of illegal endeavor, are therefore able to influence young minds to be involved and to spread among them the trickle-down benefits of that type of lifestyle. So the material gains to be associated with that type of practice, and that is conducing to what we face around us today. Admittedly, we have said that our justice system is far from being as efficient as it ought to be. It is slow. The processes are slow. The wheels of justice grind very slowly in Barbados. And if justice is not meted out in swift and certain and exacting terms, then those who are given to breach of the law will feel in growing numbers that they can give themselves to that type of activity. That again is not something which has begun in the last 10 years. The character and structure of our penal system and our penal institutions as well, we're still keeping in the same compound. I suppose we are constrained by our economic capacity. We're still keeping largely in the same compound. Those who have committed transgressions, the nature of which is not so violent, people who have done things which are of a non-threatening nature to the rest of us. We still have a situation where in the same compound, even if in different quarters of the same compound, those who are on remand together with those who have been sentenced to long terms of imprisonment and some for the commission of violent crimes. I'm simply trying to suggest that the system, the systemic context in which we punish those or detain those for their criminal behavior is such that we put the good, the bad, and the ugly together, the fortunate and the unfortunate, the mischievous, as well as those who incidentally find themselves caught up in this phenomenon. We put them all together, and certainly we have a process of institutionalization which in fact does that very thing. It institutionalizes a criminal mindset in some people. So you send a guy to a prison for an offense which is not that serious, but he's housed with violent, hardened criminals, and he has learned, he has learned by exposure to such people that this is what you can do, that this is how you play the game, that this is how you live the life, this is how you make it rich quick. And so we are institutionalizing that mindset, I believe, because of the structure and the institutional architecture around the business of detention, imprisonment, remand, however you want to look at it, in Barbados. Then the availability of firearms. This has caught the attention of the public in stark terms in recent times. It's engaged the attention of this Parliament very clearly. But the availability of firearms. When you grew up, Mr. Speaker, what was available to you was the rock on the ground. Not even the 2x3 of which the Prime Minister spoke. That would not be in immediate sight. You had to look for that or run home and get that. But the big rock was around, and that would have been the weapon of choice. But Mr. Speaker, now there are firearms available seemingly in abundance, and firearms of all kinds of sophisticated caliber available to those who are bent on violent behavior. This Parliament, this government is now treating to this. It is not a matter that started in the last 10 years. It may have been a matter that has become worse over the last 10 years, but it did not start there. We talk about the porous borders that we have. We talk about the suspect gatekeeping in which we engage, where officers of the Crown charged with a measure of security relative to our borders allow themselves to be so influenced or so induced that they give themselves to acquiescence in the face of those who seek to involve them in facilitating the flow of arms into this country. And so this government is now trying to address that, the purchase of scanners, the changing of rules and stuff like that. And all of this thing is good, but all of this thing is contributory to the phenomenon which now faces us, and it did not begin in the last 10 years. And if we treat it as a matter that has arisen in the last 10 years, Mr. Speaker, we will not properly address the situation or redress the problem. We have to see it for what it is, identify the factors conducing to it, and deal with each of them to the extent that we are able to. That lack of success, Mr. Speaker, or the effort, that lack of effort or success in targeting those who are high up the ladder in criminal behavior in Barbados, that is something that has to be addressed. I have repeatedly referred to this. You have people behind the scenes, sometimes not even so far behind the scenes, who are pulling the strings, who are facilitating these things because it redounds to their benefit and their economic interests. And those big boys who operate in the shadow behind that veneer of decency and legitimacy must be robustly targeted, investigated, and prosecuted. And unless we do that, we will not stop this scourge upon this land. And the effort to do that must not be characterized by any kind of political dynamic whatsoever. I seem to hear that this is the persuasion, conviction, of this government and that there's a resolve to do these things. I have supported, will continue to support any effort, as I have with reference to those that have already come to the attention of this House, to improve on integrity in public life, dealing with corruption in the public and private spaces in Barbados, so that those who pull the strings behind the curtain may be exposed to the full weight of the law, such that not even skills embodied in persons such as yourself can cause their escape when they are known to be guilty and evidence is available to us. So I think, Mr. Speaker, those things that I briefly mentioned and others contribute significantly to the problem that we face. I start off as well where the Prime Minister started off, and that this debate essentially comes down to a consideration of two things, basically. The interests of the individual on the one hand, and the interests of the community, national community, the collective, as she calls it, on the other. And we have to balance those interests right. And I think that the measure I hear being introduced by the Honourable Attorney General, our hard-working and honourable Attorney General, is designed to ensure that those dual interests are observed and that we make the kind of response in these current circumstances such as we do not injure the interests of the individual or the interests of the national community, the state, the collective. And where there is a tension and where there is a conflict, then the weight of force and opinion must come down on the side of the national community. And therefore, that is where I am. We have to balance the sentiments which sometimes compete, the interests which compete, that is, of the individual and of the state. I make reference, Mr. Speaker, to the Constitution at Section 11. If I may read, that whereas every person in Barbados is entitled to the fundamental rights and freedoms of the individual, that is to say, the right, whatever his race, place of origin, political opinions, color, creed, or sex, but importantly, Mr. Speaker, but subject to respect for the rights and freedoms of others and for the public interest, to each and all of the following, and among those rights to which the individual is entitled, subject to the rights and freedoms of others, is life and liberty, and security of the person, and the protection of the law. So we have to ensure, as I understand it, constitutionally we are obligated to ensure the rights of the individual to liberty, to life, to security of the person, the protection of the law, but at the same time having due regard to the rights and freedoms of the others of us and the public interests. The following provisions, I'm still quoting from the Constitution at Section 11, following provisions of this chapter shall have the effect for the purpose of affording protection to those rights and freedoms, subject to such limitations of that protection as are contained in these provisions, being limitations designed to ensure that the enjoyment of the said rights and freedoms by any individual does not prejudice the rights and freedoms of others of the public interest. You are very well apprised of all of these matters, Mr. Speaker. I'm not making reference to anything that you do not know, because your profession of practice very much relates to this type of constitutional stipulation. So the rights of the individual, very important and must be guaranteed, and they are protected, enshrined in our law. But at the same time, Mr. Speaker, the rights of the rights and freedoms of others should not be in any way prejudiced or made to be diminished. So we have to do a balancing act, Mr. Speaker. In the broad context of the wider national interests is a smaller consideration of the victims, the interests of the victims of crime, which have to be considered. And whenever there is a crime, not only is there a perpetrator, but there is a victim as well. We move against the perpetrator in the interests of the community, the state, the rest of us, but also with due regard, and a premium regard should be attached to the whole business of the interests of the victims of that crime, especially we're talking gun violence, and we're talking things like murder. You're really now getting into some deep and dark waters, and therefore, what are the interests of the victims that need to be identified? What are the victims' interests that need to be looked after? That is one of the considerations. Of course, the integrity of the system, Mr. Speaker, itself comes into vogue, because we have to protect the system, and it must be perceived to be a system that works in the interests of all of us, that lays great weight in the interests of the majority, while not in any way becoming a detriment to the interests of the minorities. The integrity of the system is important. The system must be seen to work. And I think that, admittedly, we have to face the reality that right now, the system, as it stands, is not working effectively to the extent that we would all wish. And I think that the measure being brought here before us is an attempt to give some impetus to the system so that there might be a greater level of efficiency, especially at least in this regard. Then there's the important dynamic of the presumption of innocence, which some would say that is challenged by a measure like this. Because if you deny a fellow bail up front for 2 years, you are perhaps putting yourself in a position where it may be said that you have departed from that precept of the presumption of innocence. That is not necessarily in this context an argument which I support. I'm simply saying that is an argument which will be put on the table by some, especially those who may want to oppose this measure, Mr. Speaker. Now, Section 5 of the Bail Act gives consideration to the seriousness of the offenses, but it also speaks specifically to the matter of protection of the community. So it is in the Constitution. It's also embedded in the Bail Act. I think, Mr. Speaker, and if I'm wrong, I'm sure you will be the first to guide me and to correct me on that matter. Now, I was trying to do a little bit of research on this, and I discovered that Trinidad has gone this route with respect to the matter of bail in response to their own violent crime situation. And in 2015, there was an attempt to introduce a measure which denied access to bail in under about 4 months. I think 4 months. We're doing 2 years. That's my understanding from what I think I recall reading. What I recall reading by one or two who did a review and analysis of that was that after a while, that did not seem to put a dent in the crime wave. I raised that only to suggest that I am sure the Honourable Attorney General and the government, in the larger vein, will look at this matter a pace down the road and see if this measure now being discussed in this House would have had, after a while, the impact, the effect upon the crime situation in Barbados that is intended. But in the case of Trinidad, that measure that denied you access to bail for 120 days, if I'm correct, was proven not to impact positively the crime situation and to check it. So I hope that we will measure this and the effect of this over time and give necessary review to the measure as to whether or not it should be retained, whether or not the period of time should be extended, or whether or not this should be retracted after a while. There are those who argued in the Trinidad case that it removed the discretion of the court to grant bail in the first place. I'm sure were you in that jurisdiction and had to argue before the court, this would be an argument that you probably would advance, Mr. Speaker, that you were denying the officers of the court their discretion. I reflected on this, and it is a point to be considered, especially in light of the fact that even in recent times in this very chamber, we brought a measure here which was intended to give wider and better, larger discretion to the court. This one might argue, if one wanted to be negatively disposed to the passage of this measure, that this takes away the discretion of the court. So here we are, on one hand, trying to enhance that discretion, that discretionary power. On the other hand, we are circumscribing it a bit. But sometimes necessary measures must be adopted in necessary times, in the necessary context. Obviously, there is need for other measures. We can't just, and I acknowledge that the government is doing other things, some of which have been alluded to this very day by both the Prime Minister and the Honourable Attorney General. But yes, those other things must be done in order to address. We can't simply say no bail for 2 years and believe that that in itself and by itself will solve the problem. The other things which must be done, and those other things which must be done, some of which might be costly, we've got to commit ourselves to and resolve to find the capacity so to do, so that we wrestle this problem to the ground. Now, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to deal with realities and not just operate in the theoretical frame. And there are certain realities which obtain out there. We have a subculture in Barbados today which is quite prominent. That didn't begin in the last year, that didn't begin in the previous 10 years, and it didn't begin in the 14 years before that 10-year period. But we have seen the development of a subculture in Barbados. There are many manifestations of that. The Honourable Member for Christchurch West Central will refer to blocks. Those from St. Philip North would otherwise refer to the same phenomenon, and the other things which we can point to as clear manifestations of this growing, developed subculture in Barbados. Well, Mr. Speaker, you are a sociologist as well in terms of your past professional practice. Perhaps to some extent you still are. And you would know that a subculture will come with some characteristics of its own relative to that, the expression of that subculture. One of the manifestations of the subculture in Barbados is this phenomenon of street justice. Street justice. Now, in my constituency in Barbados, Mr. Speaker, we had some people who trespassed last night and broke into some people's cars using explosive devices, not guns, other explosive devices, breaking into people's cars. Now, that is a matter that can be reported to the police. I have some fellas that wait to do some work, maintenance work down at my constituency office, and they've been carrying away some stuff. That is a matter that can be reported to the police, Mr. Speaker. But if you are in the business of trading in illegal drugs, and somebody swipes, carries away some of your drugs, or if you sell some drugs to a fella, and the fella is delinquent in his payment, that is not a matter for which you can call the police, Mr. Speaker. And if justice is to be had, it will be justice at the level of the street. So what we have here is a subculture in Barbados manifesting in very prominent terms, is street justice. So fellas are being made to feel the weight of the law that obtains on the street. Has nothing to do with the Attorney General, has nothing to do with Commissioner of Police or any officer of the court. It has to do with the accepted practices that obtain in a subculture, part of which is the exacting of street justice. So what are we going to do about street justice in Barbados? That is, in part, the way that question can be framed. What are we going to do about street justice in Barbados? And is it sufficient to respond to street justice and the dynamics attaching to that? Or do we have to address the larger problem of a growing subculture and determine why has that subculture developed? What can we do to stem the tide and reverse the trends that have conduced to the development of that subculture? And I would want humbly to suggest that this is where it is at. We can respond to the dynamics, to the symptoms of the problem, but we have also to respond adequately, sufficiently, forcefully as well, to the problem of itself as to why so many people are given to life in this subculture. Now, Mr. Speaker, I like to be real, and I don't set out to offend, but I often find that that happens. And I have to ask the question, you are in the legal profession, you have privy to information which I don't, you have contacts which I do not, you hear things which I don't hear. Mr. Speaker, is it merely in the realm, does it merely lie in the realm of rumor that part of the crime problem in Barbados is the linkage, the relationship between political elements and the criminal element? Does that lie purely in the realm of rumor, that some criminal elements feel a degree of comfort because of their relationship and association with politicians? This is not addressed or targeted to the present administration. This is a general question, an issue which has been referenced over the last several years in Barbados, perhaps not sufficiently mooted or addressed, but I have raised this before inside of this parliament, and obviously I'm talking about in a period of time before the last 10 years when I was first here. I raised it outside. I've heard other voices raise the issue. Do we have a problem in Barbados where part of the crime situation must be attributed to a relationship between the criminal element and the political class? Is that purely and solely to be relegated to the realm of rumor, or is that part of the reality? So people will seek to protect their interests. We do it in the legitimate spheres of life. And people who operate in the illegitimate arena will also seek to protect their interests. And all of that is what is happening around us. And the government's challenge is to respond to that. I understand this measure to be birthed in those kinds of considerations. And if that is the case, I would want to signal my support for that. 2 years wait for bail. That is the bail wait time. After this is passed, if it is passed here and elsewhere, 2 years wait for bail. Mr. Speaker, but I believe bail time must bear some relationship to trial wait time. So, and I'm glad the Honourable Attorney General addressed that while you will not get bail in some instances, for a period of 2 years. His resolve is to ensure that, in fact, you can be brought to trial and have matters expedited within a period of 2 years. And I think that that is the posture which the government must adopt, and that resolve is something which should be implemented with all the robustness possible, because the truth of the matter is the wheels of justice in Barbados move too slowly, to the detriment of the state, but also to the detriment of those who fall under the hand of prosecution in Barbados. And so, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that 2-year wait period for bail must bear some relationship to when a man is going to be expected to face his accusers and have a decision made one way or the other. Just a couple other things perhaps I might quickly mention. What I read suggested that magistrates' courts in Barbados don't give bail on firearms charges and some of these other more serious charges. A person, it is suggested, should have the privilege of being carried straight to the High Court. Because if you continue with the current situation, it means that a fellow who is not financially blessed may have to wallow away behind bars. Mister, you can put me right on these things. A fellow who doesn't have the money to avail himself of access for an application of bail to the High Court may have to spend a little while up the road. No, that's not so. Well,
I remember he can make his own application.
He made his own application?
Yes.
And there's no cost involved in that? Okay. Well, that is the type of thing that I am worried about, that we do not have any system employed in judicial matters in Barbados which disempowers, disenfranchises those who do not have, which discriminates in any way against those who do not have. And so from that type of perspective, I can support a measure which is designed to serve the interests of the majority of us, while not depriving the individual of his or her right to a hearing in good time, once by putting these systems into effect, we do not, by extension, create any kind of discriminatory circumstance with reference to such persons. That is where, Mr. Speaker, I am on that one. Now, I believe this thing could have some implications. Re-prison population, Mr. Attorney General, through you, Mr. Speaker. We've had problems with overcrowding in Barbados before. We know of the Glenderry experience. Built a new prison to accommodate in better circumstances, larger numbers, which I hear is already a challenged situation. And if you are denying people bail, you have to house them somewhere securely, and you have to plan perhaps therefore for increased numbers and take into consideration your capacity. Do not want to know that the numbers held at Dodds then in itself constitutes another problem for us, which could cause us grief. And I just put that out there for consideration. I'm sure the learned Attorney General would have thought this through in its entirety. And I want to say to you, Mr. Speaker, and to the House and to the public of Barbados, through you, I support the measure here today. I recognize that in a sense, we are circumscribing the rights of the individual. But if I understand our constitutional stipulations, and if I understand how our laws work within the context of the justice system, we're doing something to protect the interests of society. And I suggest that it is something which, after time, should be reviewed to see its impact and its effect. And therefore, I want to support that. I heard all that the Attorney General said with reference to amnesty. if amnesty is where you want to go. It's worked some places, and other places not work. And if that's where you want to go, well, fine. I don't know that I understand that a week is long enough, but we'll see what happens. But Mr. Speaker, in short and in essence, I support my learned friend from St. Joseph in bringing this measure here today.
Honourable Member for St. James North.
I thank you, Mr. Speaker. There comes a time in the tenure of any parliament that adheres to the Westminster system of government for the members who are privileged to serve in that parliament to make firm, strong, unequivocal decisions and to send messages to the public and the citizens who those parliamentarians serve. This is such a time, sir, in the period of this parliament. The times call for strong, firm decisions to arrest what can undermine all the economic gains that this still relatively new government has obtained in the 10 months that we have been in office. The prime purpose of any government, sir, is to secure its citizens against threats. As the Honourable Member for Christchurch South, in his contribution to the budget, very recently said, sir, a government is there primarily to protect and safeguard law, order, and good government. In fact, I think it is section 48 of our Constitution actually spells that out, so that the Parliament is there to make laws for the good order and good government of a country. We therefore, sir, have an overriding duty to the people we serve, the whole of Barbados, sir, even more so since this party won all the seats, sir, by massive majorities. We have a duty to secure the physical element and the total well-being of our people. I'm satisfied, sir, and I'm happy to see that the Leader of the Opposition, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, is giving the government support on this, sir, as well we knew he would. We're satisfied that this amendment to the Bail Act, sir, is absolutely necessary to secure the paramountcy of the security of the citizens and the people who reside in this country. A government, sir, doesn't easily come to this kind of decision, sir, to restrict in legislatively the liberties of an individual who may not yet have been found guilty, sir, because we still abide by the principle that you're innocent until you're proven guilty, sir. But times, sir, merit this kind of action. We have, as the Honourable Attorney General said when he introduced this amendment earlier today, we have had situations, 20 assassinations in the first 3 months of the year, some by persons allegedly having committed murder before, somehow finding themselves out on bail, sir, others charged with serious firearm offences and possession of all kind of ammunition, sir, but yet out on bail, sir, and then coincidentally, sir, by happen chance, a splurge in firearm offenses in murder when they're let out on bail, sir. But yet, sir, people have the right to a fair trial, so we're not casting any judgment, sir, in that absence, but the facts and the inferences speak for themselves, sir. And therefore, the cabinet, which I'm a member, has brought to this Parliament this amendment to the Bail Act, sir. This is not a political device, sir. The last Democratic Labour Party administration drafted an amendment to the Bail Act in 2017, which would have denied bail in similar circumstances, in fact, the same circumstances that we are dealing with today, for 18 months, sir. We have gone to 24, sir. We feel that the times require this time frame to bring the society back, sir. There may only be about 100, as I understand it, 150, the most thugs, sir, and sir, I, like the learned Attorney General, sir, you're not afraid to use these words, sir. You got to call a spade, sir. Thugs that creating problems in this country, and it has to be arrested for the benefit of the other 280 or 300, so whatever the population is, sir, including the visitors that may happen to be in Barbados at any given time, sir. And therefore, a Parliament has to reserve the right to look at what is of prime importance, the security of its citizens over and above the liberties of any individual person, sir. And hence this legislative intervention here today. So the intervention is still constrained reasonably and sensibly, sir, that if a judge believes that self-defense would be a good defense in a case, the judge could grant bail in under the 24 months, and that's in the amendment. If the person who has been accused of the killing, sir, did it in the execution of their official duty, sir, a policeman, it is only fair, sir, that they should reasonably be able to be granted bail in the right circumstances. Sir, if on the evidence the court feels that a satisfactory defense may be made out, the evidence presented in court at the time of a bail application within the 24-month period, sir, the judge is allowed to grant bail under this amendment, sir. But in each case, the judge has to give reasons, written reasons, and again, that is only reasonable. Put in writing your reasons so that the prosecution can appeal if it finds it fit to do so. There's provision for that, can appeal to a tribunal of a court of appeal. Sir, we are not doing anything unreasonable here today, nothing that the public does not demand, sir. I think the public all across Barbados have been asking, what will Parliament do, what will the government do about this situation? And we have to respond to public perception and to public feelings, sir. The public wants to be protected, and that's what we're moving to do today. In addition, sir, I'm in full agreement of the amendment that allows for a 72-hour period, 3 days, sir, after a bail application is filed, before the application can be heard, sir, because I must confess, sir, that this system whereby somebody accused of serious crimes, sir, murder, can go before a judge without the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions being aware and argue a case, and you don't hear the other side why he should not be granted bail, sir, really and truly offends proper common sense, sir. And therefore, I'm all for the 72-hour period whereby notice has to be given to the Office of the DPP. They are given time to prepare the case. The judge must be satisfied that notice has been given to the DPP. And let us come, sir, and argue the case on both sides so that nobody can get bail in the middle of the night, without the prosecution office of Barbados knowing. Sir, sometimes it is better for someone accused of a serious crime, sir, to be kept in confinement for their own protection. Because, sir, you are a criminal lawyer, top one to be said, sir, and we live in this Barbados, sir. We know what's going on, and we know that what has happened in the past and continues to happen, sir, is in some cases you have to protect a man from himself. And therefore, Dodge is sometimes the best place because he outside, he's going to be subject to reprisals. Somebody can come and shoot him. Some cases now, sir, you even seeing the close relatives under fire as well. So, sir, this is a reasonable intervention and amendment, sir. We will aim, as the Honourable Attorney General said, to have murder cases tried within a year. Sir, and I think that's reasonable in all the circumstances. We've passed legislation last month to allow or to amend the Constitution to permit the appointment of more judges, sir, and we would have said, I believe, that 2 or 3 of them will be assigned purely to criminal cases. We will ensure that the judges have their judicial clerks to do the research, sir, to assist them. We will ensure, and we have been ensuring, sir, in terms of technology for the judges. The refurbished Supreme Courts are due, I believe, to reopen this month, sir. In other words, all systems we are ensuring as a government will be in place to allow for trial of murder accused and serious offenses, firearm offenses, to be held within the space of a year. So the 2-year period, 24 months, is reasonable, sir. We cannot allow further breakdown in the law and the order of this country, because ultimately then, as the Honourable Member for Christchurch South has said, good government will also be under threat and jeopardy. Sir, the Honourable Attorney General also announced that a gun amnesty will be going in place for 1 week, sir, from next week. 1 week, sir, is long enough time. When you multiply 7 by 24, sir, you get what? 168 hours, sir. We only take 1 hour, sir, to walk to the nearest police station and bring in your gun, sir. And we are urging, sir, the relatives, those who live at home where the guns are, sir, to bring them in too. Don't be frightened for your son, your grandson, your nephew, sir. You are protecting him when you do this. When you bring in the guns, the bullets, the ammunition, whatever, sir, 168 hours. We've had gun amnesties in the past, sir. They have not been as successful as the police had hoped they would be. Let's hope that this one is more successful, sir. When I was, for the 7 months, sir, Minister responsible for the police, and the Honourable Attorney General, now responsible for the police, has also said this, sir. You walk about Barbados and you're barraged by people approaching you, I want a gun license. The Commissioner of Police denied me a gun license, I want one, because the Minister responsible for the police, sir, has the right to hear an appeal against the denial of a gun license by the Commissioner of Police, the Minister and the Commissioner, sir. And sometimes you say, sir, But why, so many people want guns? That is not the answer to the problem, sir. I would like every gun removed from Barbados, sir, except those that the police would have and defense force. I don't see why somebody should have a gun, sir. That's the truth. This is not America where there's some constitutional right to bear arms, sir. And America deals with America, sir. I have my views on that. So the right to bear arms, I don't know why somebody should have any constitutional right to bear arms. That is not so in Barbados. And somebody with a gun say that they want a gun because the commissioner refused a gun license. And then when somebody know you got a gun, 6 fellas hold you up at night, take away the gun, what you going to do? Another gun on the street. Doesn't make sense. Let us remove all the guns from around this place. My opinion too, sir, there are too many licensed gun dealers too, people who could sell guns legally. We need to cut that down as well. This is not any military state, sir. And we're calling on all those who have these firearms and this weaponry and these ammunitions and bullets and all that, bring them in next week, sir. Nobody can charge you for bringing them in. 168 hours. Let us come back to what values Barbados traditionally stands for, sir. As a society, let us develop. So give us that opportunity as a government to lead the way with our socio-economic development, continue leading it, sir, but we can't do it alone, sir. We cannot do it alone. Other aspects of society have to intervene and help us, sir. The church has to help us, sir. And I totally agree with the Honourable Prime Minister this morning in her sentiments on spiritual values, sir. You don't have to go to church to have that, sir. But you have to have inculcated in you a Christian understanding, spiritual values, sir. And we have to bring that back to the community. And really and truly, sir, as all of us know, you go in any church on a Sunday morning, or if you're a Seventh-day Adventist, you visit a Seventh-day Adventist church a Saturday morning, sir. And invariably, 80% of the congregation are female, sir. And you wonder to yourself, what is wrong? Why we can't get more males to come in the church, sir? It isn't only women. The women can't be carrying all the burden, sir. That's the truth. So we need to get more males back to Christian understanding, spiritual values, even if they don't go to church, sir. Some kind of religious education in the schools, sir. Again, I don't agree with America, sir, on that about religious education. Some kind of indoctrination on what is right and what is wrong. Moral values, sir. If we are to go ahead, the schools, sir, our educational system, as we said, sir, during the debates on the estimates, the Honourable Minister for Education, in response to a question from myself, sir, the first question she received in the Welsh, sir, on reform of educational curricula, sir, we need to do that more, to widen the span, to give young people with different abilities the opportunity to progress, sir. But we are giving them the opportunities, sir. We've restored state-funded university education. We're looking to expand vocational training, sir, skills training available there. The Barbados Community College, the Polytechnic, the youth programs, sir, that we have, the trust funds that we do in, sir. These are opportunities for young persons, sir, between the ages of 16 and 25, especially those who are given the most trouble, to avail themselves and to do good, not only now by society, sir, and their families, but to themselves as well, sir. And not feeling that they have to get involved in criminal activities to survive and to make a dollar, sir. You have to be able to make a dollar honestly and not involved in criminal activity, sir. These young persons, sir, mainly young men, as we said, sir, sometimes, as we said, encouraged by young women, sir. I mean, the learned Attorney General spoke about that today. Have to understand that when they get involved in criminal activity, it has repercussions in the families too, sir, because invariably you see a close female relative breaking down in the court when they get sent off to jail, sir. They were a very, 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 very nice boy. They never get in trouble. They're quiet and all of that, sir. But these are the same fellas out there that create and bear havoc in this country, sir. The fathers have to take hold too, sir. Yes, it can't only be mothers, as I said. But the females especially have more influence over their male children, in terms of the grandmothers. They might have raised them, sir. The females, that's a fact of the matter. In society such as Barbados, sir, has more influence over them. And we have to be able, sir, to bring these 150 people, sir, reoccurring, creating bare trouble and mayhem in this place, bring them to Christian understanding, sir. And we are doing our best, sir. We've brought to Parliament, within recent times, early last month, Proceeds of Crime and Instrumentalities Act, to try to take the profit out of crime, sir. We brought integrity legislation to the floor of this Parliament, sir. Hopefully we'll soon come out of the select committee, will be passed this year into the laws of the land. We've brought a constitutional amendment to this Parliament, sir, and I believe it will continue today in terms of the trying to abide by the decision of the highest court of this land, the Caribbean Court of Justice, the removal of the mandatory death penalty, sir, so that the murder cases can be heard again, and there will be the opportunity then for judges to sentence for murder and death penalty on a conviction of murder, sir, after all the reviews are carried out, sir. We've given millions of dollars in the estimates to the police, sir, to try and buttress their ability to defend the territory and the individual citizens of Barbados, sir. We've made provision for $41 million for scanners at the customs, sir, to try to curb the influx of flow of guns into this country, sir, which have obviously come in through legitimate ports of entry, if not by other means as well, sir. This government is doing its best, sir, but we need the cooperation of everybody in this country. All the non-governmental organizations, those who serve the social aspects of this country, sir. If not, we will go nowhere in terms of our economic recovery, sir. And I, like previous members, the Honourable Member for Christchurch East, spoke today, sir, and I commend as well the Prime Minister for reaching out to all members of Parliament, the opposition, the independent senators, sir, now for the second time last Thursday on bringing all lawmakers up to date on where we are in terms of the security of this land and what we plan to do to try and buttress that security, sir, and to try to, and to ask for the support, sir, of all the lawmakers in this country. And, of course, the wider public, sir. We are being transparent, we are being accountable, sir, because we know that 30 people alone in this Parliament can't do it. But we will succeed, sir. We know that there are human rights advocates around who will condemn us for doing what we're doing, sir. We have to do what we have to do to protect the integrity of this country, Barbados, sir. We can't mind people in the international arena who can tell us about human rights, sir. That is the truth. And I say that fully grounded, sir, in law and in human rights law too, sir. But you have to make decisions, sir, and there comes a time in the tenure of any parliament where such decisions as are being made today have to be made, sir. If not, parliamentarians will be found to be derelict in their duty, sir. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition has made mention of whether the prison population can take the numbers, sir, the prison's population, and it stands now, and I speak, sir, as Minister with responsibility for the prisons, sir. Prisons can house 1,100 people, sir. Right now, the population of the prisons hovers around 850, sir. A lot of leeway. But in addition to that, sir, yes, we, as a government, are committed, sir, in our manifesto and in our policies to lessen the prison population for those who committed small-time offences, sir, and to bring about more restorative justice and more community service, sir, and to remove imprisonment from those that have, breached the criminal law, sir, but not in any big way, and look to reform such individuals, sir. So the prison's population for small-time crimes, sir, should be coming down in any event. So there's no question of the prisons becoming overcrowded numerically, sir, but we also recognize, sir, and I know the Honourable Leader of the Opposition in his speech, I believe, last week at a school speech, they spoke about this. We as a government are actively looking at reform of prisoners, sir. Greater rehabilitation, sir. There's rehabilitation of prisoners. There is, sir. I mean, and there have been success stories, sir. Don't let's deny this. There have been success stories of people coming out of prisoners out of prison after long jail sentences and making useful contributions in society, sir. I have 3 paintings in my house by a prisoner when he was in prison. In there for about 15 years, sir, one of the best artists in Barbados. And I have 3 of his paintings in my house, sir. Success story. Come out of prison, hasn't got into any conflict with the law again. So it can be done, sir. There is rehabilitation. But there's a need to strengthen that rehabilitation, sir. And up to yesterday afternoon, in fact, at this very time, sir, I was in a meeting with the Superintendent of Prisons, sir, on discussing ideas and policies which we will bring to Cabinet in the foreseeable future for Cabinet's approval on how we could enhance and strengthen the rehabilitation and reform of prisoners, sir. So very vital in this. We have to, traditionally there was a situation where the prisons didn't conduct rehabilitation programs on people on remand because, they were on remand for a short time, sir, before their case came up and they were either found guilty or not guilty. But the truth of the matter is, yes, that with the lengthening of now time before cases actually can come up in court, which, as I said, we are looking to shorten it, certainly in the short term for serious offences, murder, firearm offences. So the prisons didn't really carry out rehabilitation on prisoners who were on remand, sir. That policy has changed recently, sir. The times demand that it changes, sir. And this has to be strengthened, sir. We have to look at, obviously, a parole system. The previous government passed legislation in this Parliament in 2015 on that. The law has not been proclaimed, sir, and we are obviously looking at that, fine-tune it, see where we can go for that in terms of parole, but obviously with an oversight by the state of you when you come out of prison on parole. We're looking at reform of the juvenile justice system, sir. Our manifesto spoke about securing international funding for that, sir, and just last Thursday at Cabinet, I would have brought a paper which was approved, securing funding from an international agency, sir, Templeton, on studies leading to reform of the juvenile justice system, greater educational opportunities for young people who get in conflict with the criminal justice system, trying to give them second chances in life, sir. All of this we are doing as a state and as a government, sir, to try to give greater opportunities to individuals who at age 15, 16, 17 may feel that this involvement in criminal activity is the option which they must take. They have to understand, sir, that this cannot be an option. It just cannot. It will not be tolerated by this government, sir. We will continue to do everything, every single thing, to strengthen the socio-economic development of our country, sir. And that entails securing the state against the criminal activity that we are seeing, sir, and not for the first time, sir, because yes, has been said by members, this has been around for a long time, sir. In the early 90s, you had attorney generals defending, saying there were no gangs in Barbados, sir, when everybody knew there were gangs, sir. In 1999, you had a then leader of the opposition, who the late Prime Minister of recent times, sir, who politicized it, sir, spoke about crime and violence. Sir, this is not a political issue, sir. Can't be political issue, sir. All of us have to come together to defend the rights of the citizens of Barbados. And I am fully in support of these amendments to the Bail Act, which are before your Honourable House. I'm obliged to you, sir.
Honourable Member for Christchurch West Central.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank you for this opportunity. Certainly, I promise to be brief today. Certainly not as sedulous as the Member of Parliament for St. James North, but I want to raise to support the amendment, certainly, to the Bail Act, as well articulated by the AG and certainly the Member of Parliament for St. Joseph earlier in the forenoon. Mr. Speaker, something had to be done. That is the reality. And I want to thank the AG certainly for moving with dispatch, because it is no longer business as usual. And I say so, Mr. Speaker, on the aftermath of what is happening in this country. The fact that Barbadians need to go about their business in a sense of comfort, in a sense of understanding that normalcy is a part of the Barbadian way of life, where they don't feel fearful in their homes, where they can traverse this country going to and fro from work, understanding that their lives are not threatened. And Mr. Speaker, this matter is very personal to me. It's only 2 Thursdays ago that it really hit home. And as the Member of Parliament, certainly the representative of the proud constituency, the epicenter of Christchurch, certainly, I know the Member of Parliament of Christchurch South is not here, he would argue with me. but I see Christchurch West Central as certainly the epicenter of Christchurch. And as the representative, Mr. Speaker, sir, I have a sense of duty, an obligation to those members in my community, especially the blind community. And it's heartfelt, Mr. Speaker, when I speak, because what happened last Thursday, when I got a call from none other, and he gave me permission to call his name, Granville DJ Carter. I got a call immediately after the debacle and the episode that happened at Sheraton Center, where he, along with members of the Blind Association, doing a sensitization exercise, were exposed to life-threatening gunfire, wanton behavior like never in Barbados. It was like a case of the Wild Wild West. And he called me crying as a blind man. And he says, medic, you can imagine I had to lay down on the ground. All I hear is bullets. You, Mr. Speaker, a man who I suspect had full of visual acuity, of course, 20/20 vision probably. But I'm saying, could you imagine? He said that it was the darkest day in his life. And he's a blind fella, not pun intended. But it was a dark day. I'm saying to you, it was not only a dark day in the lives of DJ and another constituent that I would call his name too. We call it Big Beard. All those seen calypsos. Roger Vaughan, who was devastated. And these blind persons, all they were asking to be engaged is to be part of an exercise where they would know the different stores in the Sheraton Center. It was a sensitization exercise. And we have to embrace them as a society, as part of this society. And what the Blind Association was doing is what we as a government, is what we were saying, that persons who are disabled, persons who are marginalized, persons at the bottom of the spectrum, those in the dawn and the twilight of their years, we are saying as a government they must become part and a vital part of our society. And their lives must have worth and independence. They must have a democratic stake. And Mr. Speaker, what happened to those persons? I say that really define the values of our society and where we have gone as a country. When you can have blind persons falling to the ground. And you know what he told me that was most heartfelt? He said that as a blind person, he on the ground, he hearing bullets. He don't know if he's crawling over a dead person, if he's going to crawl on some person who's bleeding and all the blood is going to be over his body. He was in a fetal position between a door, a loss of direction, a loss of hope.
And you don't know what you're calling there in front of
He don't know. He lost his compass. But he's lost his geographic compass. But I'm saying, if we don't put measures in place, the moral compass of this country, we will lose that too. And what happened is unacceptable. So I want to congratulate the Attorney General because measures had to be put in place. Things had to be done to handcuff, certainly, wrestle the scourge of violence and lock it behind bars. And the same way, Mr. Speaker, that we are saying as a government and the Prime Minister, the right honourable member for St. Michael North, he said, not but here. It is not happening but here because we as a government, we have a responsibility to the citizens of this country. And our responsibility as legislators speaks to ensuring that Barbadians have a confidence and a level of confidence in being able to live a normal life. And when you have the most vulnerable feeling threatened in this country, Mr. Speaker, it is high time that we make some harsh decisions. And what the Attorney General has done, I want to applaud him for because it is not longer having a plan of action. It is time to have an action plan. And what he has brought to this August chamber indicate that he has an action plan. And we as a country, as of tomorrow, we will have a new dispensation of justice. I'm saying to you, Mr. Speaker, sir, that it is not only a threat on us Barbadians, but we are a tourism destination. We live in an environment and a society where tourism matters. Tourism matters. And we understand when adversaries are put out against our country, what happens? We cannot afford for that to happen and our reputation to be spoiled as a country. And certainly, Mr. Speaker, it also threatens the economics of the country. We as taxpayers pay the bill, the health bill, when persons are involved in these crimes and these criminal activities. The effects are far-reaching. And what we are saying is that enough is basically enough. There will be no Barbados under this government. We only know one Barbados. And that is a Barbados where the citizens are safe and they feel protective in their environment. That is the only Barbados we know. And Mr. Speaker, what this act and this amendment basically says is that if you do the crime, you will spend the time. In the same way we are saying that persons who are involved in murder or who are accused of murder, firearm offenses, treason, high treason, the same way we are saying that those persons will not be allowed to have bail under 24 hours. The caveat basically is 24 months, sorry. The caveat basically is that within 12 months, the cases must start. And hopefully between the 24 months period, you will have a conclusion. And we are saying that judges, when persons apply for bail, will have to give reasons within 72 hours, 3 days, for denial or granting of. But obviously, there must be some flexibility in law, because it's not rigid. And we are saying that persons who are in the armed forces, policemen, soldiers, guards that are given firearm but by legal and legitimate procedures, those persons would be exceptions, obviously, to the norm and to the rules. That is what we are saying. But, Mr. Speaker, another problem, because if we are going to talk about the incidents of crime and violence and heinous crimes, we have to also have a conversation about social activities and maladaptive activities and behavior patterns. What is happening, Mr. Speaker, on social media? I didn't feel that social media, and I'm saying so without apology today, is a driving force behind a lot of these criminal activities. And we have antiquated and anachronistic laws as it relates to Computer Misuse Act. And it's high time that we'll have a serious look at those laws, Mr. Speaker, sir. And I'm imploring on the Attorney General to look at the laws, because a lot of these crimes are done to fulfill egos and to get hits on social media. What you see over yesterday, advertised on social media, where a young man is going to pretend to be stabbed up and bleeding just so that it be an all-fools joke. How low is low, Mr. Speaker? When do we take stock? When do we start charging some of those persons who put from sexual behaviors up to all types of crimes, accident scenes? It is almost as if we are feeding into the egos of the criminal element, because you always hear about these things going viral, and it's as if these young men and women, sometimes the elderly folk too, don't worry, it's as if their intent is to advertise on social media so that we get hits, and it is permeating the schools, Mr. Speaker, sir. I am saying that we have to change these laws so that persons who circulate these things on social media are brought before the court and spend some time behind bars too. That is what I'm saying. When you have a young man and a man saying and stating that because the bus fares go up, it's time to get robbed. You have that just so you can get a hit, and it's a joke. There's an accident, and at the scene of an accident, what you can have is before someone can lend a helping hand to the victim, a person put a blanket on the person, try to be there with them, to provide that voice of comfort. They take out the cell phone and they start to take pictures and videos to send out so that there will get a number of hits on their page. I can get 30,000 hits and 40,000 hits. Huh? And it's a joke for them. It's all about the hits. What I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, it is time to hit them with some jail time. That's what I'm saying. It is high time we have to get serious about these things that are permeating our space as a society. And it's no longer time for talk, because it has permeated into our schools, where school children carry the school cell phones, and rather than to use these devices to Google and find relevant information as it relates to their studies, they're looking for the first opportunity to put an incident so that they can get hits, and so their friends, and then you all this Instagram and all this page. Mr. Speaker, enough is basically enough. I don't think we as a society, because it happened in Sheraton Center, the incident where a young man was shot. Where would it happen next? In the nursery? Would it happen in the school? Will someone, when there is a problem and they can't resolve conflict, will you go to the school and open up fire amongst school children because you have a wanton regard for society, for the norms, for the morals? Will you go into the hospital? I heard the member of parliament for the city spoke about the incident that happened at the polyclinic. And up to last week, we had a situation where I saw a young man beat the nets with a 2x4. When will it stop, Mr. Speaker? I am saying to the Attorney General, what he's doing certainly is a move in the right direction. I support it unequivocally. It is time that we retain our society, we govern, because that's what the people in Barbados on May the 25th voted for. And we have to take some serious decisions. Sometimes the bitter pill tastes bitter at first, but at the end of the day, it is there to help the body. Because at the end of the day, there are victims, there are families. So it's not only the perpetrators that we are concerned about. We have to look at this in a holistic manner. And Mr. Speaker, because I said it would be a short intervention, I want to say that I implore the Attorney General to continue, but I want to leave today in the words of Theodore Roosevelt, the 26th U.S. President. And I want to leave with a quote, Mr. Speaker, sir. It says, "Justice consists not only in being neutral between the right and the wrong, but in finding out the right and upholding it wherever possible." It says that the right must be upheld. And when the wrong is realized, that urgent measures must be taken in place to equally deal with the wrong. Mr. Speaker, I'm obliged. Thank you.
Honourable Member for Philip West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too want to lend my voice to this debate. On the offset, I want to give my support to the amendments to the bill. I think, as mentioned earlier, drastic times demand of us swift action. And I believe that were it not for the situation that we find ourselves in, this particular bill probably would never find its way here. But we're here now, Mr. Speaker. And my colleagues have already exhausted all of the points that you can bring where this amendment is concerned. So what I intend to do is to do something a little different. I want to take this time to appeal to the young men who find themselves caught up in this vicious cycle of death. And oftentimes we forget that these are our sons, these are our daughters, these are our people. And behavior, Mr. Speaker, is not something that you're not born a thug, according to the words that I hear people use. You're not born a thug. You're not born with guns in your hand. You're not born bad. All of these things are behaviors that are learned over a period of time. And one of the biggest problems that we in the Caribbean have, in Barbados in particular, is that we have never been able to say no to outside influences. From their movies, to the video games, to whatever else. And I know there are people who will say, well, what does that have to do with it? But as I said earlier, these are all parts and parcel of the learning process. When you have movies like, what was the one called New Jack City, and all these other things, they perpetrate black people, and I'm going to say it because everybody's get frightened when it's time to talk, but they perpetrate black people as this. What you're seeing in Barbados today has been perpetrated in movie after movie after movie. From the 1970s come down. And if it is entertainment on one side, yes. But if you have young people who do not even understand their place in the world based on the color of their skin, they don't understand. And nobody is able to tell them because everybody feeding them lies. Telling them a lot of nonsense. But it's an equal place in an equal world. And all you got to do is work hard and everything gonna work out all right. But it's a lie. It's the biggest lie that we tell our children. Or to come and tell them things like, just go down on your knees and pray and everything will turn out all right. It's a lie. There are certain things that you have to understand and actions that you have to take in order for your life to take on any sort of usefulness or meaning. It don't happen in a vacuum. And education isn't it alone, it's part of it, but it's not end all. And we've created two Barbadoses. And everybody wants to bury their head in sand. They and us. And depending on which part of the social ladder you are, you know which part you fall in. And so the finer things in life are for other people. But we expect them to do. You ostracize them. You push them one side. You get them out of school early because they get in trouble. Rather than find the help that they need, you get them out of school. So the Alpine Road, looking for love, looking for some sort of communion. Man is a social being. Want somebody to socialize with today. Who you expect you can go and socialize with? The person that shows some interest in the well-being. And if that person is not the best of characters, they're still looking for that four-letter word, love. They're going to gravitate towards there. And the person who feeds you, and the person who cares for you, regardless of how you look at it, that is the person that you're going to be loyal to. But we got to ask ourselves some serious questions. Which boy you know, for any of the places where a majority of trouble come, has the wherewithal, to buy a gun, can't even buy food. We can get money from the bad gun. come to me with this nonsense. Can't. Poor fella, he himself don't even understand where he get the gun. And who giving him the gun? You know, a wise man. A very wise man. You don't see him in no books or in the things with the courts. My father, a man named Harvey King. He told me many years ago, son, do not be a willing participant in your own demise. I will never forget as long as I live. I want to pass on that bit of wisdom to the young men in this country. Do not participate in your own demise. The person who brings the gun for you already knows what the outcome of it is going to be. One, you are either going to shoot somebody, or somebody who knows that you carry a gun is going to shoot you. The second part of it is, you may shoot somebody, but as long as you go to prison, your life also is over. You mightn't be dead, but the prospects of you becoming anything more than just another number or an ex-con or whatever other negative label goes on to you for the rest of your life is still there. And then you're not even thinking about your family. If I shoot somebody and I go to prison, then what is my mother and my other relatives supposed to do? They're supposed to feel good about it? No, they won't. So even if you can't think about what's happening to the other person, even though you're destroying their families also, and you probably take away the father of somebody, the brother of somebody, this child of somebody else, what you are doing is perpetrating a mentality that is out there in the rest of the world that says that this is all black people do. Kill one another. All across the world, you can see it. And what is happening in Barbados is happening in a vacuum. I think this wake up last week and people start planning this. Because people that are making the guns just plan all the time where they're going to get their guns. We don't make guns in Barbados. We never had a gun factory yet. And there are a number of things that our people refuse to accept. Let me tell you in plain language, when you got this color, you are seen as the bottom of the ladder. Stop fooling yourselves. Don't care how much education you got. You get a truck and put all the prime ministers in the region in it and drive it through some parts of Europe and got big police escort. You know what's going to happen? People can stamp on the side of the road and wonder who's these criminals. A whole set of black people in the truck driving boat with police. You're fooling yourself all the time. And fooling young people with a lot of nonsense. Understand your place. You're destroying yourself. Every last one of them that we send up the road is good potential that gone. And they stand up and hear people out on the street. Everybody talking about hang this body and hang this. Let me tell you something, man. They do some all kind of things to people in the world. Put them on wheels and turn it and break the body in half. Put Jesus on the cross and crucify. Do some all kind of things. People still commit crimes. People still kill people. So that ain't going to be the answer. Not by any stretch of the imagination. But the day that you decide, not that black lives matter, but that all lives matter. You'll be able to see how this situation will get turned around. The most vilest offender you ever see in the world, he get a baby tomorrow and hold it in his arms. You can't believe that that's the same man that killed 19,000 people. It tells you that in every single person there is the capacity to be different to what you think or what you label them as. Our job, and it might be a hard one, and it's going to be a hard one, but our job is to start to re-educate our people. The reason why, and I think I heard the Attorney General talk about someone who said that he shot the man in the plane that died. The reason why, but the reason why he would say something like that, because I've heard it before already. Fella shoot a man, he only shoot it 2 times, and the man gone and dead then. I've heard it. I work in system. You know, that reeks of ignorance. It reeks of not knowing. But these are the people that we leave behind. Now, scientifically, they claim that 20% of your population is going to be antisocial. But don't care what you do. That's what they say. Fine. Let us agree that, for the sake of this discussion, that was so. It still does not mean that 20% of your population is supposed to end up in prison. People can be antisocial, but they don't have to be murderers. People can be antisocial, but they don't have to always find themselves in front of the courts. They don't. And so, Mr. Speaker, I feel the time has come where not just the people in these chambers, not just the people in our churches, not just those whom we consider as leadership, in whichever sphere they may find themselves. I think the time has come when we must look back in order to go forward. There's a notion of an all-African thought process of a Sankofa bird. It's a bird going forward but looking backward with an egg in its mouth. It depicts us being able to look back in our history and pick out the best that brought us to where we were or where we are in order to take us forward. Barbados has a rich history, a proud tradition, and I keep harping on it, and people laugh, but I'm going to keep harping on it all the time. If you listen to the words of your national anthem, if you listen to the words of your pledge, if you listen to the words of your motto, even if you're not religious, but you wanted something to guide you as to how you view yourself, as to how you identify yourselves as Barbadians, and I talk about it all the time, as to how you decide what is your culture, your way of living. You take these things seriously, not as just mere things that we do at celebrations, but actually study it, but actually make it a part of the curriculum in schools. Preach it in your altars. Literally brainwash people with it, then if that's the easiest term that you could understand. These are the things that make societies what they are. Any of the great civilizations of the world, you study them, these people lived by some sort of a code, something that made them behave in a particular way, something that made them go to great heights, build pyramids, do all sorts of stuff, create things. And yes, in the process, they destroy some things because destruction is a part of the cycle of life. But those are the things that mark these civilizations that we call great. Mr. Speaker, there is nothing other than here in the mind that can stop Barbadians and Barbados from making its own mark in the annals of history. And so, Mr. Speaker, like I said earlier, I support it. I support the amendments, but I do so with a heavy heart. Because the truth is, it hurts me to see that this is where Barbados has come in 2019. When we should be leading the Caribbean, needs to say the west of the southern hemisphere, we should be leading in everything because the capacity is here. You don't brag about a great educational system and then behave like a complete fool. It makes no sense. And so the time has come, Mr. Speaker, when, and I appeal to these guys again, you have a one-week amnesty coming up. Make good use of it. Put down the guns. If you want something to fight, fight ignorance, fight poverty, fight racism. These are the things that we need to be fighting in 2019, not each other. These are the things that we need to be dealing with in order that the next generation of young Barbadians can grow up in a society that is free, that is safe, that is proper, and that is just. And so, Mr. Speaker, I want all of us, all the adults, those persons who believe that they are above and beyond what is going on in the streets, those who figure that because they may have passports that would allow them to leave this country tomorrow and live somewhere else, it's not their problem. Those people who believe that their money and whatever else that they may possess, the things, because a lot of people spend a lot of time bragging about things that they have. Things don't mean nothing in the ground anyhow. But the time is coming, all of us must be involved in this particular conversation, because the young people who are dying and the young people who are committing these acts of murder were born and raised in this society, by this society. And they belong to us, like it or not. And the blame falls squarely on our shoulders because we have failed. And if we bury our heads in the sand, pretending that, hey, it has nothing to do with me because my kid's good. Well, let me give a little wake-up call. Your kids don't live by themselves. They're going to go to school. And they're going to meet all sorts of people at school. And some of them, you could get them, pick them up every evening in your car and carry them home and lock it up and do all these things. But when those chickens come home to roost, all of us, parliamentarians, lawyers, doctors, educationists, whatever you choose to call them, everybody can feel the pinch of this shoe. None of us will escape it. And so those on the outside who also want to take the measures that we are taking and make it into some sort of a political war, I will say to you, it's time to shut up and get real. Because this ain't about politics now. This is about our country and our children. And I know there are some who are waiting to score points because there are some people in this country who have not yet learned that there's a time and a place for everything. The time to play politics with this bill is not now. The time to get real and deal with the problem that confronts us is now. And so, Mr. Speaker, I thank you for allowing me to say a few words on this bill. I hope that those persons out there, because there are a lot of them, who believe that they have all the answers to everything. Now, oftentimes, if you ask them to come off the radio and stop making the call-in programs miserable and come and do something, they won't, because they're comfortable armchair critics and very, very comfortable in their comfort zones, and they can pull out every textbook and read out to you all the things that were done in Canada and New Zealand and Norway and all sorts of things, and forget that this little 166 square miles has its own culture and has its own way of doing and dealing with things. And so, Mr. Speaker, I thank you, and to my colleagues, I would just say this. Sometimes you have to make difficult decisions. Stay the course. Thank you.
Honourable Member for St. Joseph.
Mr. Speaker, I don't believe that there is much left for me to say in my wrap-up of this debate. I thank all honourable members for their support. They've supported this with passion. I know that some of them have some misgivings about not necessarily the bill, but about some of the circumstances with which we are having to contend and to respond. But the Prime Minister did say that she prayed that as a Parliament we could respond with one voice. And I think that the support that we've garnered in strong terms from the opposition and from the government benches demonstrates that this chamber is committed to grappling seriously with the issues. I think that across all of the contributions, we've been able to make clear to the public how this bill is going to work, but perhaps more importantly, the context within which we as a Parliament think it is important to approach the people of Barbados. The coming weeks will be difficult. I know that people are expecting a magic bullet, no pun intended, and perhaps that's perhaps the poorest choice of words I could ever have happened upon. But let me rephrase myself. A magic solution, a magic wand, something that will visit us quickly and achieve overnight results. But that is not at all going to be the case. What it will require is that we each, as parliamentarians in our constituencies, as we engage with Barbadians, that we assure each other that the government is on the job. But perhaps more importantly, to echo the words of the Prime Minister, the solution is not one that the political class or the police or the defense force or, this is not a solution that can be put on the table by any one entity. I hope that our combined efforts will yield the fruit that we want, Many Barbadians have been calling for the amnesty, and it is now on the table. I urge them, if they have the wherewithal to do so, to try and let us get some guns off of the street. That is one way. But the other way is the way of the police doing their job. And we will brook no interference with the police discharging their duties as they're required to by law and by practice. Mr. Speaker, I hope that this bill will commend itself to all of Barbados as they recognize that we are working within the bounds of reasonableness and the law to try to bring solutions to Barbados. But the solutions will not only be legislative. The resolve of all Barbadians must be that together we're going to eliminate this scourge of criminal violence, callous disregard for human life, callous disregard for our traditions and how we live as a society. With those few words, sir, I beg to move that this bill be read a second time.
Question that this bill be read a second time.
Is there some special constitutional?
All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
You're going to call?
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the sitting be suspended until 5 p.m.
5? It's 22 minutes. Which way? Not 5. The PM can come to 5.
I don't know.
But she's
Still
here.
meeting.
Yeah, but she will come. Not 5.
I beg to move that the sitting be suspended until 4:45.
Beg to second that, sir.
Question is that this honourable chamber be suspended until 4:45. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. This honourable chamber stands suspended until 4:45.